This is Dawn, and I'm here just to talk through and share with you a map that I created on the seed and the story. What I want to do is talk through just, some of what's on this map in terms of these are not new concepts. I think that many of us are very familiar with all of these, and yet I want to share it and, that it might be helpful to someone out there to help them see more clearly maybe where these energetic patterns have been at play in our world, in their own life, in any particular environment, whether that be home or workplace or in a social setting or in an online social media environment, of course across systems, societal systems. So the big systems such as healthcare, education, government, religion, and then the smaller systems within those systems. The story that we create, the story of life that we create begins with a seed and the energetic pattern that is sustained within that seed and that is fed and nourished. And often there is, of course, a seed point of choice that we all have in terms of what are we feeding within us? What energy are we giving our own life-giving sustenance to? And so there is, if you want to consider the two primary energies at play, there is the energy of fear and the energy of love. And from that energy of fear and that energy of love, if we allow them to be nourished and nurtured, and if we give our energy to one seed or the other, there is a growth from that. There are offshoots from that. And then those lines of energy, or those lines, they're lifelines that are created, although in one case it would be anti-life lines. And so these lines of growth or of energy that runs from this seed creates various patterns and various results. So on the side of where the seed of fear is fed and given energy and given life, there is a chaotic dissonance that is created, and that pattern begins to replicate. And when the energy of love is nourished and that seed is watered and grows, there is a harmonic resonance that emanates out from that seed. So when it comes to this seed being nurtured, either the energy of fear or the energy of love being sustained within a system or within your own heart, your own life, there is either the line of discouragement or encouragement. And that starts often within us in the stories we're telling to ourselves. Now, at times this is, of course, a conditioned pattern that unfortunately results from what we hear when we are young. But at some point we all have the choice. What voice are we going to listen to? And I'm not saying it's not difficult, because I know from personal experience how difficult it is. But this is a question we can ask ourselves individually and then collectively and then within all of the different groups and systems and circles of belonging where these energetic patterns are at play. And so this is one of the first questions to me is, to notice the feeling of the energy, and then to look at this place of discouragement or encouragement. And that always begins within each one of us individually. So often when that discouragement line is fed, there becomes a culture where there's the creation of closed systems. And there is a natural tendency to operate in such a way that it is overpowering or power over. And then there is the creation of those closed systems that are themselves disempowering to the individuals, ultimately even to the one who is taking the power over. So often these are hierarchical systems. On the other side, with the energy of love and the an environment where there is encouragement, there is also empowerment. And there are open systems that are created where actually there is an expansion and the birth of new, there's the creation or the birth of new empowered operations. And ultimately, there is the thriving that comes from these systems because they are sustainable. Whereas with the energy of fear and in environments where there is a continual discouragement and really a dissonant energetic pattern, there is a closing down, a contraction. Whereas with the energy of love, there is always an expansion. So ultimately, with the energy of fear, there is often a sort of flat line. There's a one-dimensional view. It's also very set, fixed. Whereas with the energy of love, there is more fluidity. There's a multi-dimensional perspective. As opposed to the linear thinking on the with the energy of fear, there is more of a spherical system and ever expanding spheres of influence and by influence I mean the inflow. There is a fluidity, a flow, a gentleness even. There's room, there's flexibility. There's the welcoming of multiple perspectives. This is not to say that there is not any authority or any direction. Quite the opposite. That flourishing and the sustainable systems, which are themselves dynamic, is made possible because of the room for growth and expansion of all. Whereas with the energy of fear, in the system where there is overpowering and power over and a closing down, a lockdown, there is the illusion of progress, but it's actually not that. It is all built on, any seeming progress is built on essentially a belief in separation. Whereas with the energy of love, there is a shared experience of unity and an understanding that what creates our future is the ability to be present in the now, that the now is our next opportunity window, and that the future is just made possible through a finding of unity, through the understanding of radiant expansion. And so there's a freedom in the process of getting to where we're trying to get to. There is an allowance, a more natural approach to growth, that there's no worry, no hurry, and there's an honoring also. Let me go back to that seed of fear and the seed of love. When there is the seed of fear and one makes the choice, or many make the choice to feed that fear and to go with it, there becomes a sort of consumption, because there's essentially a power grab. There's an reaching to external sources to get what one needs. It's to get a fix, essentially. And there's this consumption that occurs. There is a need for more and more and more and more and more of this power, because it's a perceived lack from the very beginning that must be covered up. And there's also shame here with the energy of fear. And so it leads to this consumption that ultimately, of course, consumes the individual or the system that is operating in this manner. Whereas with the energy of love, there is from the beginning the choice to harness energy from within and to choose a path of creation that is then shared and showered upon those that one comes in contact with, whether this is individually or within a system again. So this story of separation or the story of unity are the two big stories. And essentially with the energy of fear, ultimately it leads to an experience of contraction for all, whereas with the energy of love, there is the experience of expansion of all and for all. On the side of fear, when that seed is watered and nourished and that energy pattern is allowed to expand, there is the solidification of a belief in scarcity, and that ultimately leads to divergence in many, many ways. Whereas when the seed of love is watered and nourished, when there is that energy harnessed from within a system, within an individual, within a group, within society, and there is a choice for creation, there is a natural convergence that occurs. It doesn't mean everything becomes the same, but rather that there is like a harmony and this harmonic convergence that is rooted in a belief in abundance, and that belief flourishes and is always being magnified. Again, there's a radiant expansion as opposed to a radioactive contraction that's going on with the energy of fear. Essentially, the story of separation is what sustains the growth of a fear-based system, whereas the story of unity is what sustains the energy of love and lifts it higher, higher, higher. The story of separation and the energy of fear, that seed of fear, when it grows, it can only grow when there is an empowerment and or a animation of a matrix of self. It's a singular approach. It is an isolated story. It is, we're in this, by ourselves. And so it's a story of dominance. It's a story of control. Again, it's fed by fear. So this matrix of self is, I see it as like sort of a Tower of Babel. This is what it is. You make that decision and you decide to build a world. Whereas with the energy of love, there is, again, that story of unity that is beneath everything. And there is a matrix of soul from which one operates. So see, the very point of conception of these two worlds that are created, they're rooted, of course, in belief systems, yet they are sustained by the choice to place ourselves within a particular context. The matrix of self, the world, what some would call the 3D, and or a choice to place ourselves and operate from the matrix of soul, from the higher harmonic, from, I like to think of this as heaven on earth, which is the natural state of who we are. In the beginning was the Word, and we were created for thriving and for life, to experience life and life to the full, and to see ourselves as the Creator saw us, created in the image of God in the beginning, to return to a natural state. Whereas with the energy of fear and that seed of fear that is fed through time, these lines, of course, grow out and become many, many things. And so this is the state we find ourselves here in 2020 in our world, is that there has been the creation of, a myriad of interconnected systems that are literally rooted in scarcity, not abundance. They result in, divergence, not convergence. they ultimately take from the very people they purport to help, and they are doomed from the start because consumption, leads to one place. And as we move into, maybe we make this passage to a new society and into a new era rich in love, we want to begin to feed more and more and more these dynamic and sustainable systems that are where energy is harnessed from within, and that are creative, and that do create a space for grace, and that are founded on the principle of abundance and harmony. And here in the United States, what do we say? Liberty and justice for all, freedom and love. And this can only happen when our story is one that begins with a matrix of soul, that begins with a unified worldview. And by that I don't mean, I'm not talking about nations and some kind of global one world. Rather, I'm talking about a view of who humanity is, that is one that is not limited. It's growth oriented. So ultimately, on the side of the energy of fear, this idea that we have of separation, and we're in this on our own, it's an illusion. And it's an illusion that leads to a disintegrated experience of life, whereas the energy of love and our understanding of who we are as through the eyes of sacred union and unity allows us to see clearly. There's clarity there, and there is an integrated way of moving through the world. It's integral. When you feed the energy of fear, and there is this, sort of power dynamic that is created, there's a culture of collusion that becomes like it's a spell. We're spellbound. Like we're sucked into it. It sucks everything into its own agenda, essentially. So there's this culture of collusion, and there's because the illusion becomes so embedded in our society, this illusion of separation, there's a great chasm, and it's experienced internally in individuals and in groups and in society at large, and it creates a chasm into which many fall, and the degree to which we each fall is different, but the damage cannot be disputed. So this culture of collusion, and there's also a coercion that occurs, and ultimately a insistence on compliance that occurs with this energy of fear. And so much is lost in this chasm. On the side of the energy of love, what we experience and rather is, so because there is this encouragement, this empowerment, this expansion of all, the primary systems there are defined by sustainability. They're sustainable. They're defined by sovereignty and the recognition of sovereignty of all. They're defined by the seeing of all as sacred and an honoring that is absolutely absent in the systems that are fed by an energy of fear. The other thing here is that the energy of fear, when it is allowed to flourish and expand, and it is not, it moves forward unhindered, there are rampant distortions. There is the creation of discord. There's destruction. There's decimation. These are the results of these systems of fear. Now remember that this collusion that's occurring and this coercion and compliance, many of us have been conditioned to live in such systems, to be compliant, to allow ourselves to be coerced, to exist in this culture of collusion, to coexist essentially with the illusion of separation, to remain spellbound because it's just the way it is, to remain locked into this false matrix of self, because what choice do we have? Well, we always have a choice. The choice is to return to the seed of love within us, to harness that inner energy, and to feed those things in our lives, and to place our attention there, to exist within a matrix of soul individually here and then with one another, to give our power to and empower those systems that are aligned with the truth, which is that we are a people created in the image of God, I would say, the divine. We are set free in love. We choose then to feed systems that are regenerative, that uplift, that are connected, that are coherent. We choose not to, with the seed of fear, what's going to happen is ultimately corruption will creep in. Ultimately, there will be a degradation of individuals and of society itself, even with those in the hierarchy that appear to be having made it, right? And also, I'm not even discussing here the whole implications in terms of money and economic systems, but consider that as well. So if you're, you're feeding this seed of fear, or we are collectively feeding this energy, these energetic patterns of fear that are rooted in separation, there will be a degradation and a corruption. It will often be driven underground because we want to perpetuate the illusion of success. I didn't write this down here, but the illusion that we want to create is one of success. Now, it's a self-defined success that is not at all successful because it's based on disempowerment. That's, prettied up to look like something else. The seed of love, the energy of love, again, is regenerative. It uplifts, it nourishes, it is restorative. It is rooted in respect, not disrespect and disregard. The closed system that is created, this closed systems that are created by this overpowering, dominant energy are, incredibly disrespectful and essentially have disregard for the individuals and other groups and systems that they swallow up, they consume in their operational mechanism of consumption. And so there's always a shutting down, even though there is the illusion of success that is created. Whereas with the energy of love and the seed of love, as that is, there is a flourishing humanity, a flourishing, systems, dynamic and sustainable systems they're fed by and they result in restoration and a great return to freedom and love, and there is dignity that is returned or reestablished. I think of how Jesus talked about the kingdom of God, as he called it, and or the realm. When we seek first this state of love and freedom and unity, all these things are added unto us. That there is a natural flourishing that occurs. And there's also a playfulness, I think. I didn't write that down either, but there's a playfulness along with the, integration and the thriving and that occurs in this experience of a more harmonic environment. There's a real beauty in thriving. Whereas while the illusion on the side of separation and fear is that there are individuals and particular societies, even nations, that have made it. It is a tower that will crumble because it's not built on a solid foundation at all. It's built on shifting sands because the energy from which it grew in the beginning was the energy of fear, not love. It was the seed of shame, not grace. It was the seed of rebellion and anger and perceived injustice. It saw itself as existing within a bubble, essentially, and bound. That's why I wrote spellbound at the top near separation. There's this idea from the start, before we fed it and it grew into what it grew, that we were somehow bound. But on the seed of love, there is the freedom. There's a unified field. And we know that we belong to this. So there's clear seeing. Wherever you have existed within these fields, there's always the choice to begin in every single moment. And then, it's more difficult, of course, when we've created these huge ways of being in our lives and then in systems in society that are rooted in, say, the energy of fear, because it's a little more tangled and complex. And yet, ultimately, we can return to soul simplicity, and we can choose to give our energy to the seed of love within us and the seed of love that we plant within all of the places where we choose to contribute, to be a contributor. Contribution is also something that comes from the energy of love and contribution of all. Whereas, again, with the energy of disempowerment and discouragement that comes from the energy of fear, there's the exclusion and the denial of participation. So that's another way to kind of see what energy is feeding a particular system. Last thing I want to mention is that in the middle here, you'll see this sort of like DNA-like structure. I think of it as the eternal, the everlasting, a rebalancing, the line of equanimity and balance and peace. And in the middle, I've written these 7 wonders of the soul, which are faith, hope, love, healing, growth, passion, and beauty. And these are connection points. They are wonders that are within us, and they are anchor points that will help us to return to the full energetic sovereignty that is the true nature of who we are individually and collectively, and to begin to harness that energy from within. So if you feel a little like lost on how you could possibly do that within a particular environment or within your day-to-day life, then just dwell upon the wonder of who you are as faith, as hope, as love, as healing, as growth, as passion, and as beauty, and find ways to cultivate these wonders that are the true nature of who you are at the very root of your being, your soul, your whole self and your soul self. And this, to walk in the way of wholeness, is to begin to cultivate these wonders of who you are and who we are collectively together, because these are also true of the whole of humanity. We've been fed a story about who humanity is that is false, that was rooted in an energy of fear, that is a story of separation, not the true story of thriving and belonging to each other. Consider the story that you're telling in your day-to-day life and in any given environment or system. And ask to be led to the choices that will be ones that allow for a return to and a full expression of the energy of love, and allow that seed to become a sprout and to become a growing seedling and to flourish and to thrive and to be nourished by the sun, and see yourself as always existing within that world, within that matrix, within that field of grace, set free in love, by love, for love.